As you heard, my name's Benjamin Law. I'm really thrilled to be talking about art, technology, and the future with you here on beautiful Gadigal country, part of the great Eora Nation, given that this continent is home to the first technologists, the first artists, the first philosophers and futurists. You know that this is the opening weekend of MCA's major summer exhibition, Data Dreams, Art and AI, which has been curated by the absolute power trio that is Jane Devery, Anna Davis, and Tim Riley-Walsh, who I believe are in the room. Can you put your hands up so we can give you a big, come on, please. Okay, we know who you are, we know, point to them, point to them. We've got spotlights. No, we don't have spotlights. We don't have spotlights, but thank you so much for your beautiful work. Today is an invitation for us all together to really imagine our future and reflect on the technologies already shaping it. And we've got the exhibition already, but today becomes a dialogue about the intersection of contemporary art and the evolving role of AI in culture and society. And we're here to ask the really big questions. Who holds the power behind the algorithm? Can machines dream? What does it mean to be a human and an artist in the age of AI? Full declaration, I'm not a visual artist, but I am a writer, and I create work for the page, stage, and screen. And I have so many mixed feelings and questions about AI. So on one hand, like every other writer I know, I have had all my work scraped by AI and large language models without consent, consultation, or compensation. And I find myself asking, you know, why isn't AI really helping like those other things like geopolitical collapse, environmental collapse, financial collapse, instead of stealing my job? But on the other hand, I, of course, use AI quite regularly for a lot of tasks that I would prefer not to do. I use AI to transcribe the interviews that I do, and I am personally really wary of the binaries that a technology is either simply good or evil. What I think I'm more interested in, and I hope you're interested in too, is how we are using AI, how it's changing art, how it might be utilised to present new and exciting opportunities, and what are the other questions that we should be asking. And I can't wait to talk to our guests, the artists, academics, researchers alike, about all of that today. So let's welcome our first guest. Our first guest is a leading AI scholar, author and artist. Her best-selling book, Atlas of AI, received 3 international awards, has been translated into 12 languages. Her latest project, Calculating Empires with Vladan Joler, won the Silver Lion at the Venice Architecture Biennale 2025. Time 100 named her as one of the world's most influential people in AI. And our guest with her is an academic researcher and artist whose work blends critical design, data investigations, counter-cartography, investigative journalism, writing, data visualization, and myriad other disciplines. With our first guest, Kate Crawford, he created Anatomy of an AI System, which won the Beazley Design of the Year Award in 2019, and jointly their work has been exhibited in more than 100 international exhibitions and are held in permanent collections around the world. Can you please join me in welcoming Kate Crawford and Vladan Joler, everyone? Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad to be starting this day with the both of you, particularly because I think when we start talking about AI, we probably need to know, first of all, what it is, and secondly, how it works. And this is the work that you two have been doing together. I think most of us have a sense of what it is because we've used it, but when it comes to how it works, it feels pretty mysterious sometimes. And you've given us the anatomy of an AI system, which is projected behind us right now. It looks like a schematic. It almost looks like an autopsy. Can you lead us through what we're looking at?
Happy to. And let me just start by saying hi, everybody, and a giant thanks and congratulations to the curators. Tim, Jane, Anna, what an extraordinary achievement. It's been a delight working with you. So effectively, this piece was actually the first work in Vladan and I's collaboration. We met around 10 years ago, And we were at an AI conference in a 15th century monastery, if you believe. And everybody was talking about AI as though it was this sort of immaterial spectral force. It was code in the cloud and all of these, immaterial metaphors. And it was very clear to us that, to really understand what AI actually is, you have to excavate the material layers. You have to understand the minerals, the energy, the water, the labor that goes into making these planetary scale systems. So together we basically, started sketching out all of the data pipelines, and then we went, that's not enough. We've actually got to open these things up and look at every component and trace it to the mines, and then go to the smelting and the refining and the shipping, and trace that whole story all the way through on this side to the end of life, where these devices are thrown out after about 2 or 3 years into an e-waste tip. And so this is the story of just one device. It's the Amazon Echo and the planetary resources it takes to run one.
This is a really common device that a lot of people have in their homes, that people probably here also have in their homes. When you buy that device or something similar, it looks very self-contained, very smooth. We might have a think about where it's manufactured, like most of our products, but beyond that, we don't really know much. How much did you know before you started this project versus how much you know now that it's behind you?
Okay, but yeah, I think this map was just one stop in a journey, because both Kate and I spent like many years before that in order to understand, investigate all of those invisible layers behind technology. And for me, like, I don't know, it started with one single internet packet, and then I started to follow this internet packet, and then I get kind of obsessed about it. So I started to investigate, like, okay, what is this hop? What is that hop? Where is this data center? Another one, so on, so on. And this became some kind of never-ending journey for me, and I'm still with it. I think Kate also. And this is basically just one snapshot in a time, like 2080 snapshot of like where we were back then in our understanding of complexity. But the problem, it's when you start to deep dive into those like invisible frontiers of technological infrastructures, processes, there is never end, because for me it's some kind of n-dimensional space in which you can go in many different directions. So if you follow data streams, you will end up in some data center, but then you can ask, okay, but from where this data is coming, and then you can end up in a map calculating empires that have 24 meters by 3 meters of history of computation, classification. So it's some kind of never-ending n-dimensional frontier of unknown, and I'm like really surprised why people are not making more maps like this, because like we are constantly in our lives are also like moderated by those infrastructures, technologies. And I think for me personally, it's like the map, it's some kind of usual answer to that. I need to know the map in order to understand how this world works. And so this is what we are trying to do now for many years. No?
Yeah, and I think this idea of how you know is also really important. I mean, both of us are professors and have been researching these technologies for a long time, but this project changed how we began to study and understand these systems, going from, much more traditional, behind a desk or in a lab, to going out into the field. So, what this project required, and certainly it's sort of shaped my work ever since, is, going into lithium mines, going inside Amazon fulfillment factories, going to the labs where the data sets are being scraped and designed, and talking to people, meeting the click workers who are sort of manually tagging the data and now doing, reinforcement learning with human feedback. And I think for me, that was an absolute transformation in terms of thinking about this, rather than in a complete arm's length way, actually seeing the impacts on the ground. And you'll see some of the pictures behind us, speaking of the ground, We also frequently exhibit this work with a collection of 28 minerals that are most commonly in these infrastructures, both in AI systems, but also in the undersea cables, in the internet routers, in the data centers. And so giving people that sense of the physical materiality is a way of kind of bringing that into a gallery space so that you're not just thinking about it as an abstract representation.
You know, as you're talking, when you're leading us through this journey in terms of the lithium mines that you go to, the data centers that you're talking about, the workers that you're engaging with, I mean, you're doing research. It also sounds like a deep act of investigative journalism as well. And when you're embarking on journalism, you are always going to encounter barriers to the information that you want, that there are gatekeepers preventing you from knowing what you want to know. What were those barriers and what were the gatekeepers that you found in your way of what you wanted to find out?
I mean, there is unlimited amounts of barriers. Because like if you many of those dots here, some of them are completely different types of methodology. So for example, for the first dot on the top of the map, you need to know how to do I don't know, trace routing, and then your trace routing networks. For the next one, you need to investigate patents. For another one, you need to go on field and to touch something, to see something, to break something. So each of those dots, even they look the same, behind many of them are different types of methodologies that, and this is what I think maybe is this is maybe the power of art investigation, because you are not so afraid of like doing whatever you can do. So for me, for example, like if I'm investigating black box, I want to use all the possible methodologies, because like some of them can give me another, you know, like insight into this kind of black box. But all of them are literally around each of them, it's a layer of untransparency. So different kinds of layers. So some of them are just not visible. I mean, like many of those things are not visible for us. So we need to find a way how to collect data and then to visualize data and then to see something and then to ask ourselves, okay, what is it? What's the meaning of this, you know, network that I'm seeing or whatever. Some of them are protected by wire and military. Some of them are like corporations or like factories that have some kind of like a security system, so on, so on. So it's like what I really enjoy in this, there is no, and this is maybe why even this is like completely marathon that we are doing for many years, but I'm still excited because like each dot that we are adding to this map is probably another type of investigation, another challenge. So you're just never being tired of it because it's always different. You need to learn many different techniques of investigation, but not also techniques of investigation, but also like how to think about that, how to think critically about that, how to reflect on that. For me, this is why basically I started to work with such a great like media theorists and scientists and philosophers, is because for me I was like spending each amount of time on like trying to understand what I'm seeing and giving this kind of like a theoretical or philosophical reflection on the map. Because if you look at anatomy of an AI, it looks like as a technical drawing, but in a way it's a highly political and highly philosophical also like construction, no? So this is this kind of like a fine dance between philosophy, art, investigation, and everything. No?
It's so interesting to me that it's such a struggle to actually do the work that you've done here and continue to do. I imagine if we wanted to find the schematics of an air fryer, we'd be able to understand that technology, and to an extent it might be transparent, maybe not. But with this, it sounds so opaque in so many ways, right? So that lack of transparency, that the lack of knowledge, the invisibility that you talk about, Vladan, what should that tell us about AI and our understanding of AI as users and consumers?
I mean, it's really interesting because, of course, we did the years of research for this project in sort of 2016 up to 2018. And if we roll back time, this is before the generative AI wave. And so we were able to get access to facilities, to meet with people that right now are seen as national security sort of spaces and are much harder to get into. And perhaps what I think has certainly happened in the interim since we produced this work, and obviously we've produced several others together, but this is the presentiment. This was the hint of what was to come. And so it kind of has a slightly prophetic quality because everything on that map is still true today. We're kind of just commenting, it's kind of interesting that all of the research here still holds. But what has now happened with AI is this has been increased 1,000-fold, like the amount of minerals, the amount of energy, the amount of water, the amount of labor, the amount of full extraction to build generative AI is absolutely eye-watering and completely planetary in scale and very, very tightly contested. So companies will not reveal now what their training data is, which we could get, say for GPT-3, we know that our books are in there, we don't know what's in GPT-5. So the level of opacity is actually going up at a time when we most need it to be more transparent, because these systems are politics made manifest. They are shaping our lives, and this is why it's such a democratic issue to actually make these works more publicly accessible, and to put it in places like museums where we can have these kinds of discussions about the ways in which AI is simultaneously a significant political actor and at the same time, out of reach of most democratic institutions and human agency.
But there is also, so transparency is one for sure, but then the problem of all of those systems that are so complex. So another problem is complexity and scale, because even you have, for example, we investigated within this project Knowing Machines, we tried to investigate certain data sets, training data sets for AI, and then you're facing something that have 1 billion images, or you are facing, so we also scraped, do you remember that? We scraped the suppliers, we found some kind of obscure website with the suppliers of NVIDIA, and we did 3 layers of suppliers of suppliers of suppliers, and we ended up with an Excel sheet that have 2 million rows. And basically it cannot be Excel sheet, maximum for Excel it's 1 million rows. No? So
we basically blew up Excel multiple times.
So then you're facing this complexity. And then the next question is, okay, what I can do with it? Because those scales are not meant for us to understand and to research. Then we need to create another tools or maybe another AI that will analyze these that we don't want to do. But in a way, we need tools. We don't have tools. We don't have accessibility to those systems. We lack a lot in this process.
And one of the great benefits of collaborating, so we worked with a Pulitzer Prize winning data journalist who was extraordinary in helping us build systems to reflect on incredibly large-scale data sets. So, Christo Buschek is, just one of the people in our Knowing Machines collective. We have a collective of researchers that we work with. And it just shows how many people you need now to do this kind of work. It's getting exponentially harder. But we're also really lucky. When this piece was shown at MoMA in New York, people started contacting us and saying, hey, are you aware that this data center is being built by Elon Musk in South Memphis, or are you aware of this? So
you were getting tips as a result.
Yeah, people are reaching out to us now, which I think is really fantastic because people want to see this as something that more people can know about. So I think there's really a movement now to make this something more palpable and something that we can actually really start to make the stuff of public pushback.
So would I be right to assume that although what we're seeing at the MCA and behind us is a self-contained work, that this work is also in flux and therefore needs upgrading as well, or warrants upgrading with input from us as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. So anatomy, as I was saying, anatomy stands. Everything there is as true today as it was when we did it. Calculating Empires, which is the new work that was at the Venice Biennale this year, that changes so it's a history. So this project maps space. It's looking at the space of planetary computation. Calculating Empires maps time. So it looks at the 500-year history of technology and power over this sort of massive 24-meter sort of fresco that Vladan was talking about. And because we're dealing with time, every time that show tours to a different city around the world, we update it, not just in terms of what's happening, but also in terms of the deep history of that location. And so it's been really interesting to have works that are actually constantly in a kind of an iterative mode. So yeah, it's kind of killing us, but it's worth it.
Yeah, but they also, I'm in another camp. I'm in the camp of not changing the map at all.
Probably wise at this point.
Because I think what anatomy is saying, but also calculating empires, is like the core logic of extraction, of exploitation of inequality, of exploitation of human labor, of extraction of our private data, whatever. That's not changing. You know, what we can change on anatomy of an AI, it's maybe which chip it is or like whatever, but it doesn't matter, or which scale it is. Like, but the core problem. So I think when anatomy of an AI map change, we are going to be like a really nice society and really nice Earth, because it will change when this kind of like extraction based on inequality and like, yeah,
this work,
colonial
yeah,
is not there anymore. So
there are so many myriad facets to the work that you're doing in order to present the work that we can see. You're talking about systems upon systems, histories upon histories that are all overlapping, and then at the end of the day, what you want to provide us is a clear visual representation of your findings. And I'm wondering, on a practical level, how hard that was to synthesize into something that was comprehensible to us.
Gosh, I mean, I think it's without a doubt, Vladan and I feel like these are the hardest works we produce. I mean, as artworks, you know, we have enormous latitude to think about how they're presented and what they do, but the research behind them is extremely laborious. So this was a 2-year project. Calculating Empires was a 4-year project. And that was a very heavy 4 years in archives, interviewing, going to locations, and then illustrating at scale. So, I mean, I would say that this work takes us to our limits, both our intellectual limits and our physical limits as a type of practice. But it is, you know, it's interesting because I think for us, I think it feels like doing kind of multiple new brain extensions. I kind of felt like we got 3 more PhDs from doing some of these projects and got a really different sense of how to understand at a kind of a limit. And it's always at a limit. I mean, the reason if you see this work at the MCA, it's, you know, presented in a black box, and that's because yes, these large-scale AI neural nets are black boxed. Even the people who create them don't know entirely how they work or what they produce. But then you have the legal black box, the fact that so much of this information is, you know, kept as, you know, corporate secret information. And then you have, you know, the black box of location. Tracing supply chains can be really difficult. You can hit points where it's almost impossible to figure out which exact mine, you know, this lithium came from. So that sense of complexity is always with us.
I'm also just wondering, like, does this mean that this work in particular needs to have a team of lawyers around it to protect it as well? In terms of like the...
Shh, Benjamin, don't alert them.
Okay. No one heard that. This stays within here.
For a second, to go back to the process of synthesis or making of this. This is like completely different way of thinking, and I feel for myself this is like my natural way of thinking. So it's some kind of non-linear schematic thinking. So you don't think in the same way when you are doing this or compared to when you are making a book, okay? Because the book, it's a linear form. So you start with this and then you end up with something. This is like you think in a several dimensions and several directions in the same time. And then basically you start from one dot and then you're asking questions. Is there like 2 lines from here, 3 lines from here? Is this a triangle or a square? So basically constantly you are So it's a different form of thinking. And this is why maybe it gives you different kinds of result when you are when you are doing some kind of like a linear thinking. Is it like a movie or like a book or whatever? So this is for me more closer to a space, like a computer game. So for me it's like more closer to Zelda, because you provide some kind of like a territory for people to explore. You provide them a language made of dots, triangles, images, or whatever, and then they are able to maybe explore the story. You can maybe lose them on the way if you go too crazy, you have too many dots and too many lines. But in a way, so this is some kind of like a dance between like, complexity and how to structure them, how to play with them and stuff.
And like Zelda, very many puzzles to unlock along the way. I'm very mindful that it's been very recent that you've won the Silver Lion at the Venice Architecture Biennale. Like a round of applause for that achievement. Like that is monumental. It feels like the work that you're doing is an invitation to start a very, very important dialogue. And I also feel like that what we're talking about is a corrective in some ways. And on a large, on a big scale, like what are you trying to correct? What are you trying to address that we haven't had in the discourse around AI so far?
Well, certainly in terms of this work, if we think about sort of 2018, thinking about AI as a material infrastructure was very uncommon. And honestly, people would say, "What do you mean it's having environmental impact? Like that's not the case. These are just spectral algorithms." So we were really trying to give people a completely different way in of understanding. So as an artwork, it's also a provocation to see differently. And then with calculating empires, we and to be honest, it came out of this sort of two kind of movements in particular. One was a deep sense of frustration with what's happening with generative AI. It's being seen as somehow completely new, unheard of, this break with all of human history. We've never been through this before. Of course we have, but you only see that if you trace out centuries of repetitions of these forms of technology and how technology is used by empire to concentrate power. So when you see those echoes over the longue durée, you get a very different perspective of what's happening right now. And you start to understand, AI isn't just a set of technologies, it's a set of companies that are operating within a very specific political economy and within a geopolitical reality. And when you look at that, you do start to see those sorts of lines of empire recur and recur. And so it's a way of moving outside of technological presentism. This idea of, what's the latest model? What's the latest thing? What's the latest tech scandal? It's like, actually look at the long view. And so that was really, an important part of the corrective for that. And the other thing, honestly, calculating empires came out of COVID. And, Vladan and I started working on that at the start of 2020. We're trapped, couldn't travel. We were on like different continents. And we were like, now's the time to do the really big historical project while we have, time felt infinite. And so I think there's a reason that project is, 10 times the scale of this one, because we could really create like a full inhabitable installation around time.
You're talking about the long view, you're talking about deep research, and I'm wondering for those people who have AI in their lives ambiently, they have their Alexa, they have their Google device, you walk into their home, suddenly it alerts, but they know the work that you do. What are those conversations like now that you've got this deep knowledge versus the rest of us who are still using it without necessarily having thought about the things that you've thought deeply about?
Yeah, I don't know, but people are usually asking me, once you start to understand and more, are you now being completely paranoid and scared about the world and stuff like this? And no, you get used to it. We all, we are all, in our lives, we are, all doing this kind of, I think, comfort of using those things. It's really evil thing, because slowly even we have a conceptual or whatever, philosophical, we don't agree, but they're kind of coming to us.
It creeps.
Creeps. And another problem, it's like the main question, one of the main questions that I'm getting is like, okay, but you are not forced to use those things, and that's completely crazy idea, because like now we are more and more. So this is basically, is it like this kind of typical colonialism or not, techno-colonialism or not, is defined by, okay, is there our will or not? But basically, the thing is like, the question is like, who can stay out of it? And what is the price of not participating in that? So the price of like not having email. What is the price of not having any kind of social media? So we can all do it like tomorrow, but the price is too high and getting too higher and higher, because we will not be invited to a party. So we are no. So the thing is like the who can stay out of that? It's a basically privilege. So either you have a lot of money, so you don't need to check your emails or whatever. Either you are forced. So lower you are on the economic scale, you are forced to use all of those things, because you need to be efficient, you need to be on time, you need to be fast, and it's going to be faster and faster. And in the first line of calculating empires, we are speaking about time as a form of control. And basically, we are forced to be part of this hyper-frequency capitalism, in which now, because of stupid AI, we will need to make a website in 2.5 minutes. That doesn't mean that the rest of the hour will be free.
Yeah.
You will need to make thousands of websites. So that's the and then to stay out of that, to say, okay, I don't need that. I'm not. That means I have a privilege to be outside of it. But many people don't.
I hear you. So much of the focus is on our individual autonomy or experience with these things, but we're all part of these structures that are so baked into our lives. And yet, in all of that, we still all have to individually wrestle, right?
Right.
Do you feel that wrestle? What's the wrestle like for you?
I mean, it's exactly that problem, which I think is this tension between individual action and collective action. We're being told like, well, maybe given that we know that every AI query takes 10 times the energy of a traditional web search, or that generative AI is now using as much energy as Japan, that you start to, well, I should not be using it, or I'll at least think twice before I generate a video on Sora. But it's the wrong unit of action, because again, these are collective issues, and it's not about this sort of front end of the interface. It's about this back end of how this power is concentrating all around us. Even if you could, live in a cabin and not be online and not use AI, these are compulsory systems now. They're in the back end of everything we touch, from employment systems to communication systems, and it really is being forced on people. I mean, you're starting to see this shift now, particularly in the United States where I'm based, where people are being told you have to show that you're using AI in your work. In fact, now Meta just said that all of their employees will be assessed on the basis of how much they use AI, right? And you can see that as an early indicator of what is going to come. I mean, the academics in the room, you'll be told, how much you're using AI or you're not being efficient, because it will be correlated with efficiency. But in actual fact, and I just have to share this because I thought it was extraordinary finding, a study that came out 2 weeks ago showed that programmers using AI, 80% of them feel like they are more efficient and they're doing work much more quickly. But it was shown in the sort of, by the researchers sitting there and timing them, that they're actually 78% slower. And isn't that amazing? Because the difference between what you think you're doing is like, oh, I'm going to just put this into Claude code and I'm doing, but now you're having to go back and fact check your things or check your code. And actually, in the end, you're spending more time fact checking AI hallucinations than you are doing the cognitive labor. And so this type of cognitive outsourcing, I think, is so much more profound than people realize, not just in terms of time and the ideology of must be faster, must be more efficient, but in terms of what we're doing to our own cognitive capacities.
Okay, we were talking about provocations. I think we've had provocations, histories, context. Thank you so much for giving us not just the lay of the land, but this work as well, which is not only quite overwhelming and profound, but deeply useful as well, which I think is such a gift. Could you please all join me in thanking Kate and Vladan?
Thank you.